and welcome to this special edition of Indianomics, where we are looking at restructuring banking. The entire banking sector is going through a reset. There is the bankruptcy law in the first place, which will probably become seriously operational in a year. Before that, the Reserve Bank has announced rules for resetting or restructuring sustainable stressed loans. And then, of course, there is a consolidation process underway, and there is an ultimate rule also which the Reserve Bank is talking about, that in 3 or 4 years, every bank will have to ensure that it is not exposed more than a certain level to highly indebted groups, and that if it has to bring its exposure from 25,000 crores to 15,000 crores to 10,000 crores to big companies, big groups by the year 2020-21. So banking is genuinely in a resetting process. And to tell us how this whole course might pan out, I have with me two people who have just been there, done that, seen it all, who have been through probably 2-3 decades of banking evolution in India. I have with me Mrs. Kalpana Morparia, currently Managing Director of JP Morgan in India, and Mr. Leo Puri, Managing Director and CEO of UTI Asset Management Company. But really that's a very inadequate introduction. Mrs. Morparia has been seminally involved in the evolution of ICICI Bank merger. 14 years to the day almost, that merger. And then, of course, the old cycle of restructuring assets that went bad from 1997 to 2003. And Mr. Puri, as the head of the banking practice in McKinsey, was actually involved perhaps with Mrs. Morparia in many of these ideas and their implementation. So I think I have the best brains to take us through how this process might pan out. But Mrs. Morparia, first things first, the most recent set of rules to hit the banking sector is telling banks that you take every stressed company, divide the sustainable and the unsustainable loan, and write down the unsustainable portion. What's your first takeaway about this? Is this a moral hazard?
So first of all, Lata, I wouldn't quite describe it the way you did. So I think it's in the interest of every bank to try and restructure a borrower who's currently unable to pay his debts. And there can be a variety of reasons for why he's unable to pay that debt, but in the interest of time, I won't get into that. But what this enables the bank to do is that when you do this assessment of a leveraged borrower, and you find that in the foreseeable amortization schedule that you had, given the life of the asset, whatever, they're just not going to be able to sustain the level of indebtedness that they currently have, that you do have an option to determine what is the sustainable level of debt that can be serviced during the life of the asset. And then the balance debt is something that you could convert into a non-credit instrument, such that when the cycle turns, you will be able to enjoy the upside. So I think it sets up a framework. If I might say, this is not new. I distinctly remember in the 80s, when way before the late 90s stress that we went through, I remember even in the 80s, when you really had to do with the restructuring, we were indeed talking about the sustainable level of debt. And what is it that the banks could do in those days, the term lending DFIs could do, to try and ensure that indeed when the cycle turns, we do get the benefit of an upside rather than stay with that small spread that we were otherwise.
That is why I invited you, Mrs. Morparia. I mean, I'm sure you will even remember that in 2003, IDBI, ICICI and SBI sat and refinanced those 3 steel companies, and you all got the upside in Ispat. I mean, no taking away from that. Convertible debt converted to equity had its advantages. But what I'm asking you is, should Reserve Bank have put it in rules? When a company becomes unsustainably stressed, banks have gotten together and done this. But now if you put it in a rule, bankers are telling me every minute there are phones ringing saying, "Mera debt ko kam karo, halve my debt."
No. But none of this is mandatory. This is all at the option of the lender. You see, in a stress situation, the lender clearly will have the upper hand in terms of how they want to resolve it. Do they want to take the company to liquidation? Do they really want to give a unsustainable debt that's not going to get serviced? Or is there a possibility of trying to segregate the two and getting it done? Do you get it done with existing management and ownership, or do you get it otherwise?
So you don't think it will be a moral issue?
As
a moral hazard issue?
Mandatory.
Okay. No, it isn't. But, what happens is, let us assume there are 10 steel companies. I mean, steel will be the obvious sector. There are 3 of them which are terribly stressed, 3 of them which are moderately stressed, and 4 people who have actually wisely used and not over-invested during expensive times. The other guys were not going to get this munificence, and the bad boys get the munificence. You don't think that will create legal problems?
But at the pain level to them. So if you see the guidelines very carefully, the question of the promoters taking a pain alongside with what the banks is taking has to go side by side. So it's not a free ride.
No, it's not a free ride. But Mr. Puri, to get you in on that, the debt, take any ex-steel company, most of them have 30,000, 40,000 crore debt. So let us assume 15,000 crore is getting recast. If you take out 7,500 crore, the equity will be 50 crore. If you want to bring down the stake of the company, or even, take it to be 200 crore. What is the stress the bank is taking? It's 7,000 crore that they will have to take. So really, is there pain for the promoter?
Well, actually, I think what the scheme does is it recognizes in a pragmatic way the reality. And there are 3 elements to this which I think are persistent realities in our banking system. One is, whatever resolution we've done in any cycle, and I'm looking back now 3 cycles, forbearance always plays a role. And I'll come back to the importance of forbearance, because this is a form of forbearance embedded here. Nothing wrong with that. Forbearance properly used can be a good tool. The second is, whatever restructuring has actually successfully happened in India, and there may be exceptions, but I've not seen any, have only really been undertaken by the promoter themselves. To your point, is this moral hazard? Maybe, in some cases, not in all. But it's actually a wise recognition that unlike other markets where third parties can come in, professionals can come in, people like the McKinseys and others can come in and carry out resolutions effectively, we are where we are. And there are reasons why, fundamentally, if you want to restructure, you need the promoter to be part of that solution. You don't want him to be part of the problem. You want to ensure he's part of the solution.
I take your point.
And the balance on this moral hazard is, as Kalpana is saying, how will you ensure that there is pain? All bailouts, which is what this is, and we're in a very serious crisis here at the end of the day, will carry some risk of moral hazard. The TARP carried a risk of moral hazard. Every bailout carries a risk of moral hazard, because there's always a question of the guys who did well are not the ones coming
who are getting the benefit.
With cap in hand to actually seek this.
Okay, I'll take the moral hazard issue out, because all too big to fail cases are moral hazard cases as well. But do you think that banks will get the upside? Promoters who usually, devious is a strong word that will not apply to all cases. Some of them are victims of circumstance. But will these promoters hoodwink the banks at a later stage somehow dilute the equity and not let them have the upside?
I think the mechanism proposed here is to have a committee of wise men who will both ensure that the definitions of sustainable, unsustainable are fairly carried out and prevent, to some extent, some of that gaming. And also offer banks the cover, very importantly. And I see that as a third pragmatic element of this proposal, because you do need banks to be protected. Reality is we have banks where bankers can't make these decisions. It's a whole separate problem related to the sad state our banking system is. But this proposal accepts that. It doesn't pretend that we have bankers, as we sometimes dangerously do, who actually make decisions on resolution. In the public sector, bankers do not make that. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality. Now, we might as well accept that and give them a mechanism. They're not ICICI. Give them a mechanism where they can make these decisions through this mechanism. This mechanism will be tested. hopefully it will ensure that there is much more value for the banks properly done than there would have been in any other scenario.
Okay.
Will it be fair? Only time will tell.
No, I just wanted to make a minor point that there are some public sector bankers who are eminently capable of, I'm just putting in a word on
all of them, I would say, are capable. It is the system that...
yes, the kind of reporting, reporting...
individual capability. It's, are we in a process which allows?
No, I was just rounding off a point where I think I have to be fair to a large number of bankers as well. But Mr. Puri, do you think there will be enough M&As because of this? To some extent, M&As in these stressed companies are not happening because nobody wants to take over 40,000 crore of debt. But if that got written down to 20,000 crore, there may be. But still, will there be, or will we still have to, be kind to the promoters?
No, there is actually allowance in the system where you can replace the promoter. It's not that you have to work with the promoter.
But you see it happening
this creates an option to work with the promoter. In some instances where that's not proving feasible, you can go back and actually try and dilute the promoter out of existence or transfer control. I'm not sure that will actually happen, to be honest. I wish if that were possible, we would have seen the SDR work better than it has. The SDR has been left intact as an additional tool. All of these are just about giving tools to bankers to do their job a little better. And I'm glad that we've given this tool. To me, is a very pragmatic set of tools which has been added. I think it's better than what we've seen to date. Perhaps that was too ambitious. There will be some risk of moral hazard that will be mitigated by the way in which it has been designed and by this committee of wise men. The good news is it gives us a chance to move out of the logjam that we have actually got stuck in.
If I might say, wise men and women.
Okay, we are all out to ensure that we are politically correct. We have to take a break on that note. Our two veterans have definitely given a clean chit to the rules proposed by the regulator, but what will be the result? How successful will they be? Those questions to our experts in a minute after this break.